Welcome to the Microsoft IT Pro Podcast, a show about Office 365, Azure, and the IT Pro and end user side of life. Each week, we'll discuss a different topic or recent news related to Office 365 and Azure and how it relates to you as an IT Pro. The MS IT Pro Podcast is never longer than 30 minutes, so let's get started. So, here we are again, Scott, another episode.
Yes, once again, into the breach.
Yes, and what do we want to talk about today?
So I think today we're going to talk about something that most people think of as end-user focused or helping you grow your services in Office 365, but I think is a huge operational awareness kind of tool, and that's the Office 365 Content Adoption Pack that Microsoft has put together for Power BI.
All right. Sounds good. I'm excited about this one. I agree with you. You hear adoption and you think, oh, this only counts when you're rolling it out. It's way more than that. And I'm actually surprised too at the number of people that have even missed that this is available.
Yeah, so this has been out in preview for a long time, and it's technically still in preview mode. But that being said, anybody can go out there and sign up for it. So let's talk a little bit about what this is and kind of give people some background, and then we can kind of dive into how they can use it to improve their lives and how you do some planning around what your tenants got going on and all that good stuff. How's that sound?
That sounds like a good plan to me.
Let's kind of talk a little bit about what this is. So this is a content pack for Power BI. And what it does is it reaches out into your tenant programmatically once you've given it access, and it pulls things from your management and reporting APIs, and then it stores all that data in its own data structure so that it can give you some reports around some key content areas. Specifically, you get numbers around Exchange, Skype for Business, SharePoint Online, including things like group sites that are backed by SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business. You'll also get a little bit of Yammer in there. And one of the other big ones that you get right out of the gate and out of the box is licensing and entitlements and what you've had going on there. So if you ever want to do trending or things like that. Is there anything else you'd kind of throw in there about it?
No, I mean, that really gets it. I know there's some stuff too around even Office Pro Plus, activations of that on new desktops. Like you said, it kind of pulls all those reports together. There's a lot of reports just right in the admin center, but I really like it because while you have those, they're kind of, some of them are a little scattered here and there. This just pulls everything into a nice dashboard for you. Let's
walk people through how they get it.
All right. So the first thing you do is you go open up Power BI. Don't worry if you don't have a ton of experience with Power BI. It's super easy. You don't need any additional licensing for it either. The nice thing is all you need is Power BI free. So you go over to your Power BI environment, open it up, and you have a couple of options there to create new dashboards. You can go look for kind of some of the ones that are already created. I think it's listed as service apps when you go create one, or you could build your own. If you go look at the apps and just search for Office 365, it'll pop right up. You'll see the Office 365 Content Adoption Pack. You click on Get It Now and click on Install, and it walks you through a few steps. Overall, it's pretty easy. Probably the part that could trip people up is, as part of it, you do need to grab your GUID for your Azure AD tenant, Office 365 tenant. So you do have to navigate over to that Azure AD tenant. There's a few different ways to grab the GUID. As part of the setup process, they walk you through, hey, go over to Azure AD. If you're in the new portal, you can look at the properties of your tenant. If you're in the old one, the GUID was up in the URL. So you click that, you click next a few times, and there you have it. The one caveat to all of that is before it'll actually let you connect and start pulling that in, you do have to enable this within your Office 365 tenant as well. So I neglected. I skipped the first step. Forgive me. Go to your Office 365 admin center. go to settings and actually enable the Power BI content adoption pack right within Office 365.
Yeah, so that surfaces under reports. They added that for the latest preview that came out. In the past, you were just kind of going in and giving access to the data. And they've also improved that onboarding a little bit. So if you do happen to go in and start at kind of step one and enable that within your admin portal in Office 365, what you can do after that is head over to the reports section and you'll see a new tile appear under reports that actually gives you a link to just instantiate that content pack and get up and running. A word of warning here. So when you do turn that on and you turn on that access and you say, I would like to start kind of crunching that data and getting it ready to ingest into Power BI, it does take anywhere from like 24 to 48 hours to start to build an initial data set. So what you really might want to do is go ahead and enable that in your tenant on the Office 365 side, walk away for a couple days, and then come back and click on that tile and everything will instantiate cleanly and run straight through for you. When you do connect, you have to be pretty intentional about who you connect as. So there's different levels of administrators in Office 365. So I can be a global admin over all services and have access to all data. I can be an Exchange admin, a Skype admin, SharePoint admin, et cetera, et cetera. And depending on how you connect, that content pack is only going to be able to pull the context of who you are and the data behind who you are. So if you connect as an Exchange admin, you're not going to see all the rich data around SharePoint or Skype or some of those other things. So ideally, what you'd want to do is, if you're not a global admin, have one of your global admins instantiate that content pack in a workspace that you have access to over in Power BI, so it kind of pulls everything in behind it.
Yeah, which it makes sense. Like you said, you're not going to want your SharePoint admin being able to see all this rich Exchange data. So it's nice that all that security trimming is built right into, if maybe you do want to have different people being able to view different data. You can even instantiate it a few different times, because I know one thing I've run into too with clients is maybe your global admin goes in, sets it all up, but if you don't have Power BI Pro, you can't really share that dashboard with anybody else. It's locked down to him. It's one of the new changes with the Power BI Pro around sharing some of those dashboards and everybody being able to see it. So if you're just doing this on Power BI free, you may even have different dashboards within your tenant that different admins can create, so they can look at just their area.
You can do that. We also worked around that a little bit. So we have some data that we consider it's okay if it gets publicly consumed or somebody sends out a link. It's not giving away anything really sensitive about what we do as a business. So because this is Power BI and it has those reports and dashboards, you can go ahead and customize those as well. So effectively what Microsoft's giving you is a data set and a data model that's ingested into Power BI, and then they've put their own visualizations on top of it. But if you want to add your own, augment, change, anything like that, you can create your own custom reports in there and tie into those data sets in that data model once it's all up and running, which is hugely powerful, right? Because you need your view of the world, and your view of the world might not be what Microsoft comes and gives you in there.
Yeah, I know as I installed it, looked through different reports too, you made this comment, we were actually talking a little bit before we started recording, that some of the data maybe isn't even grouped necessarily the way you want to see it. Maybe you want all of your storage across Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive for Business, one page. Maybe you want different reports broken out. It is really nice that because it's Power BI and they have it built for you, but there's that whole data model in the background, you can group things differently. You aren't forced into just the reports and just the organization of where they're surfaced that you're given out of the box. You can go as crazy as you want to with customizing all these reports and dashboards.
Let's spend some time and talk about kind of the data that's behind it, right? So we've walked in, we've instantiated it, it's up and running, it's ingesting things. I have this nice, pretty dashboard, and it's backed by these reports and things like that. But really what we're after is all that kind of the meat and potatoes, right? What's sitting behind it and ready to go. So there's a couple of kind of core pillars I guess I kind of call them core pillars when you put this up. So the data is broken up into kind of 4 major topical areas. So it has what's called the adoption report, which is meant to help you understand how your users are really getting traction and stickiness within a service. So for instance, how many users am I having sign in to Office 365 holistically month to month versus how many I have licensed? So if I have 1,000 licensed, only 500 are signing in, well, I've probably got something else going on there that I need to take a look at. One of those other buckets is communication. So that's centered around messaging, whether that's within Exchange. So think about like email messaging, kind of like that one-to-one collaboration or one-to-many. And then also Skype for Business. So all your chat, IM, video chat, all those things, all that telemetry is available in communication. There's collaboration, which includes SharePoint, OneDrive for Business, and your Office 365 or unified group sites that go ahead and back any of those properties that you have up and running. So you'll see all that as well. And then you mentioned activation. So activation is the other kind of core area. So that's who have I entitled, who have I licensed, and then within those, what are they actually using? So just because I gave somebody an E3 and they have the ability to activate Office Pro Plus, have they actually gone ahead and done that? So you can actually go ahead and follow up on all that data and have access to all that stuff that's within there. So if you think about some of these and being able to dive in and see what's going on, typically you might be looking organizationally and saying, hey, we've made an investment. What are we doing? I think from our side of the house, from the system side of the house, there's also some big things in there. So you can understand something in adoption of trending for how users are actually accessing a service. So if your Azure AD is correct and you've populated departments and location, you can actually go in and see things on a rolling 12-month basis. So I can do something like say, all right, we're going to do a new rollout of Office 365. Maybe we do like a new acquisition or a new office, and it's in South America. So, all right, let me go and figure out my data centers and my connectivity and all those kinds of things. So I know I'm going to need to onboard this many users. I can see how many in the same geography, how they use it and what's going on, and help me kind of make those projections for where I need to be. And then you can take that across all the stacks, right? So I'll be able to see my storage trend in things like SharePoint. If you've ever struggled on the Office 365 side to figure out where the heck is my storage actually coming from, because you don't see things like group sites in the SharePoint Admin Center today, hey, guess what? It's all in this Power BI content pack and sitting back there and just ready to go for you.
It's really nice. And one thing you hit on there that I did want to call out too is you mentioned the rolling 12 months. So that's implying that you only have 12 months of data here too, right? It's not like we can go back across our last 3 years and see it all, or 2 years. We get roughly a year's worth, 12 months worth of data that shows up in these reports.
Yeah, you get enough to establish a trend, right? So if I'm going to look at something and I actually want to be able to see peaks and valleys or hockey sticks or, just dropping off the cliff, you can't often do that if you're going day to day, week to week, month to month. And sometimes even 6 months isn't enough, right? If I'm trying to do any kind of like long-term projection, I want to see a little bit more data around that to understand where it's going. And that's where having that 12 months really helps to roll through. If you do need more data than that, you're going to have to figure out another way in there. I think one of the things that everybody needs to keep in mind is this content pack is accessing your data out of your tenant through some APIs that are available to everyone. So there's management and reporting APIs that are out there. It's not really doing anything too magical other than Microsoft's wired up and done all the plumbing for you. But if you really wanted to go out and get access to that data and maybe like data warehouse it or something else, you could certainly go out and programmatically interact with it, whether that was through PowerShell or you paid your developer, in donuts and coffee to go build you something and push it out there. It's really not like magic sauce. They're not using any tooling that you don't have access to. It's just really nice that they've kind of shrink wrapped it and put it in a package for everyone.
I like that too, that it is so customizable. And again, they're not doing anything secret. So before we keep going, talk about some other things around what you can do with these reports, maybe dive into the data behind it a little bit more. Let's take a quick pause and hear a little bit from our wonderful sponsors, BitWizards.
You love technology, so do we. You're an experienced IT pro. We respect that. You're a problem solver. We've got clients. You need a tan. We've got a beach. You love Azure. We love Azure. At BitWizards, we've won Florida Trend Magazine's Best Companies to Work For 8 years running and have been a Microsoft Gold partner since 2001. I don't know about you, but it sounds to me like we were meant for each other. Go to bitwizards.com/cloudsmith to introduce yourself.
So what else do we want to talk about around this adoption pack, Scott?
Well, I think one of the really important things that everyone needs to understand is the data set that lies behind it and kind of how you can interact with that and take it above and beyond what it is and turn it into something that's going to be really useful for you. So one of the things that happens when you instantiate that pack, or depending on how you get into the program, you may or may not have access to the actual published schema for that. But, I have the schema sitting here in front of me, so we can kind of walk through some of it and talk about how it's structured today as it's presented in the latest preview. So within that data set that backs this content pack, effectively, it tracks data in two ways. So it thinks about things in terms of state. So, as an example, I have a user, and a user has some properties around them. They have a username, they have a department, they have a location, maybe they have a set of licenses or entitlements assigned to them, things like that. That's all kind of stateful data, right? It's always there and it doesn't change too much. And then the other group of tables are activity tables, or your data around activities. So for that user who was stateful, well, if I log in, that's an activity on my part. If I upload a file to SharePoint or to OneDrive, that's an activity on my part. If I do a chat in Skype for Business, that's all an activity. So what happens is on the back end, you're effectively seeing state tracked across a couple different things. So specifically, that's user state. So what's my user ID, department, location, things like that. You'll have mailbox state. So within Exchange, for things like my primary mailbox, when was my mailbox created? How much storage do I use holistically? Things like that. SharePoint state. So which sites am I a member of? What's the site name? What are the URLs? Who are the owners? How many documents? How much storage per site? Things like that. OneDrive state. Same thing as SharePoint, right? So there's a OneDrive, who's the user it's associated with, how much storage, what's going on there. And then some of that activation data. So user state for products. So you've assigned Office Pro Plus to somebody. Who's it assigned to? When was it assigned? When was it possibly activated? Things like that. And then user state for activations. So you're effectively covering kind of those big pillars. And I didn't say anything in there about having state for teams or state for like groups holistically or state for planner, any of that other stuff. And that's because it's not there today. So it doesn't exist. It's not there in the content pack. So if you want that kind of data, you're going to have to figure out some other way to get it because it's not in the shrink wrap thing and ready to go for you. On the activity side, I think is where it starts to get a little bit interesting because this is really where you get kind of your core trending and what's going on with everything. So the biggest one is probably your product usage month to month. So what that is, it's your counts of your licensed and active users and your month over month retained users across every product. So Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Skype, and Yammer. And that's where you start to get into that rolling 12-month retention of data. But what that one lets you do is it lets you see things like if you've actually wondered, how many users do I have licensed versus how many are active? So they've come in and they've signed into a service and they've accessed some data in it. And then based on that, how many are active based on the number that I had licensed and were active the prior month, you can actually start to see trend lines around who's using it, when they're using it, when the upticks are. So operationally, you might think your busy season is, September and October, and then you come in and you look at the data on this side and you figure out, hey, that might be the busy season for one segment of your business, but really everybody else is ramping up the 2 months before that. So you can actually see all that stuff in kind of a graphical format or put it together on your own. You also have product activity month to month. So for each of those products, same kind of thing, OneDrive, SharePoint, Exchange, Skype, what's going on with the activity in those products month to month rolling on 12 months? User activity. So Now we're down to per user level information about any of the activities they perform in any service. This one's a little bit weird because it's so much more data. You're only getting 6 months of user activity. So where I might be able to see a 12-month trend someplace, now I'm only going to be able to see a 6-month trend here. And then you have, outside of your user activity, you also have specific breakdowns for SharePoint activity and for OneDrive activity. So SharePoint is per site. OneDrive is per OneDrive, or effectively per site, right? And you get a bunch of different things out there that distill it down for you. So number of files in SharePoint sites, and that can be a team or a group site. Same thing for OneDrive, number of files. Which users interacted with those files. And an interaction is everything from a view, so like reading or opening a document, a Word document, to edits. You can also see things around things like sync activity. And one of the big ones, depending on how your organization is set up, I know in mine, we do a lot of external sharing. Like we're very externally facing to our customers. And you can also see that data around external sharing and what's going on there. So are we seeing big upticks? How is that coming in? And what are we seeing from the outside world as people come in and interact with our data? And all that is rolling month to month. And SharePoint and OneDrive are kind of big data sets as well. So they fall into that 6-month cutoff right now too.
So just a little bit of data. There's not a whole lot there behind the scenes. Just a few things, right?
Just a little bit. So, but I think it's important that everybody understands that that stuff's out there, right? So one of my big frustrations with this when I very first hopped into it was I really wanted to see data from other sources that I thought should be there. So understanding some of the APIs it interacts with. So, if it's interacting with like my audit API, it should have some other activity around mailboxes, and that's just missing there. So you can kind of level set your expectations and not be as frustrated as I was when I stepped into it.
Yeah, and that's what I've told people too. It's as they start looking at this, if you don't see something that you're looking for, don't see a particular chart or graph, don't get frustrated by it. Really go look at this schema of what's being tracked, of what you can see, because you can probably build reports, you can create other visuals that Microsoft didn't put in this initial bundle. And there's some pages out there too about even customizing it, that data feed, the OData feed that you need to connect to. And we'll put some of these links in the show notes so that you can even just go start from scratch. Go pop open Power BI on your desktop, connect to this OData feed, and just start building your own reports, starting from nothing. Again, if there's certain reports, maybe you don't want to overwhelm certain people with the amount of content in this one. Just create your own simple report, simple dashboard that you could give to a person or two. Maybe you just have one person that cares. All they care about is the OneDrive stuff. It makes it really easy to just create a very simple OneDrive report or dashboard to share with them, just using this data that's already available.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about kind of some of those integration and extension points, right? So you mentioned in the way back when we started about being able to, we can load this up in Power BI free. If I've got other pro users, Power BI Pro licensed, I can just share the dashboard with them. What are some other ways or places that, you might want to surface that data out there and have it available to people?
So another way you can surface it, make it available, is actually in Microsoft Teams. Kind of a cool feature with Power BI as they've rolled out the teams and the groups is you get a workspace that's associated with these teams. So if you load the content pack up into a workspace, if you've ever looked in Teams and looked at adding additional tabs, or as they continue to improve, it's going to be apps, you can actually add a Power BI tab within your Microsoft team and then point it over to this dashboard. So in one of the companies I work with, they have their SharePoint team, and their SharePoint team was obviously curious about OneDrive usage, about SharePoint usage. So instead of having to tell them, go navigate over to Power BI, go down to the workspace, go find the report, go find the dashboard, we just went in and added I think it's a report. You can just add that report right into the Teams. So now they're doing their daily work. They're in Teams. They just click over, look at the report, can quickly see that data around SharePoint. So sharing it in Teams, I think, is a really cool functionality. And again, this isn't just for the adoption pack. You could do it with any Power BI report, but specifically for this, to be able to quickly just go see that reporting. And then another one, again, it's just Power BI, it's native functionality, but you can also take these and just embed them right in SharePoint sites now. I can't remember, and maybe you remember, Scott, if you can do it in the classic view or if you have to stick with the modern UI to embed Power BI in your SharePoint site. But all these reports, dashboards.
Two ways.
Yeah.
It's a little weird, right? There's that Power BI web part, which requires Power BI Pro licensing. And then there's the embeds, which are effectively anonymous, right? They just have a link associated with them. So anybody can view that data.
Again, either one of those ways, embed it right in a SharePoint site. So if you have a team site, a site you're using with your team, maybe you haven't rolled out Microsoft Teams yet, but you still want to surface this where your users do the daily work, you can just embed these right in a SharePoint site and let users access the reports and dashboards that way.
One of the other things you can do is, because this is Power BI, you can go ahead and not only surface the data to kind of external sources like we've covered here, but you can also do other integrations, I'll call them integrations or amalgamations, mashups within Power BI. So one scenario we ran into was, yes, it's really nice that we track kind of activity at a high level with some of like the activity state tables and things like that. And it's surfaced in a visualization. But sometimes we want to see more data, or we want to be able to tie things into a specific geography. So I might know your location from Azure AD, but that doesn't equate to the actual location that you might sign in from, right? Maybe you work out of Jacksonville, but you work a lot remotely for other companies, right? So you might show up on like a VPN in Michigan or Wisconsin or something like that. So really, I might want to consider where you come in. So one of the things we did is we tied into some other content packs as well. So there's a content pack for Azure AD, which lets you view things like user sign-ins and user activity across multiple applications, not just your kind of Office 365 ones. So we take all that sign-in activity and we mash it back in to actually relate to what's going on in a particular, like day, week, month, 6-month rolling thing for sign-ins across applications. So I want to see if you signed into Office 365 and some other third-party thing we bought. So maybe I want to see like how you're doing with Salesforce or, with Concur, things like that, because we've tracked all that activity as well. So being able to kind of tie it all back and put it all together in one place for everyone is kind of immeasurable in its value, right? Being able to say, hey, just go here, look at this. And by the way, this is all compiled data. So have fun. You can slice it. You can dice it. If you need to filter and see by just this month, you just click right here and add your filter and boom, that's your data and you're up and running.
Yep. That sounds like another episode, Scott, another podcast episode on the Azure AD content pack. We'll have to circle back around to it. Yeah, absolutely. But for today, that about does it for our time. So we'll wrap it up and we will talk to you again next week.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Ben.
All right, thanks, Scott. If you enjoyed the podcast, go leave us a 5-star rating in iTunes. It helps to get the word out so more IT pros can learn about Office 365 and Azure. If you have any questions you want us to address on the show or feedback about the show, feel free to reach out via our website, Twitter, or Facebook. Thanks again for listening and have a great day.